Hey everyone, Thunderbro here, and I recently got thinking as to what exactly the theme of Gintama is. What is the ultimate lesson or message we're supposed to receive from Sorachi's work? Now, not all media texts have a message or overall theme, but most try to convey something, send some sort of message to the audience. Whether that be a political or moral message, a warning about something, a case for a certain way of life, etc., etc. This isn't always the case, and it's not always very clear depending on the work you're consuming, but I love being able to decode what exactly the author, writer, or director is trying to tell us through their work, and how they go about sending us that message, as well as how they can interweave it into the plot or story without it seeming forced. My favorite media text, Gintama, doesn't have one overall theme or message that you can pin down across the entire series. At least not as far as I can see. Gintama's nature as both an episodic comedy and an action drama makes it hard to pin down what exactly its message is. Rather than present one message or theme to the readers and audience, we're presented with several. Sorachi tackles several important themes throughout Gintama in both his comedy and his drama. Of course, Gintama approaches several societal issues and makes many commentaries on mass culture, media, gaming, and anime and manga culture. But I found that Gintama has 4 themes that do span the entire series and greatly influence the development and interactions of the characters. The first of these is being yourself. Sorachi has several of his characters struggle with personal hurdles in regards to their identities and who they want to be in life. Gintama tackles ideas that are set standards of behaviors for certain people depending on their gender or background, and how said ideas are ultimately irrelevant and unimportant. Kagura struggles with other Yato telling her how to live and what she should be doing, but ends up dedicating herself to being her own person against those ideas rather than simply embracing them. Kyubei has to contend with conflicting notions of masculinity and femininity due to her traditional male raising in a place that expects people to fall into one of the two categories. As she spends a lot of time in the series finding a middle ground and eventually coming to the conclusion that being true to herself is the best way to approach the issue, rather than accept what society wants her to act like. Saigo and his son face ridicule for Saigo's choice to identify as a woman, but Saigo is not only portrayed to be just as awesome as he had been before, but his son accepts his father's choice and does not view him in a lesser way. These things serve to communicate that choosing a lifestyle for oneself beats adhering to the collective constructed standard. The next major message is accepting people for who and how they are and seeing the good in them. A common comedic element of Gintama are the flaws, pitfalls, and hypocrisies of the many characters. Characters spend a lot of time complaining about each other and pointing out the things that anger them or don't make sense. I could go on and on about the specific complaints levied at every character, but for the most part, these complaints are only surface level, and are not demands to change. Rather, these are complaints in a fashion that friends usually throw at each other. A major aspect of most friendships is being able to call out your friends on their bullshit freely, and that's exactly what most characters in Gintama end up doing. For example, Shinpachi and Kagura consistently complain of Gintoki's laziness, lack of outward mature qualities, bad diet, his late payments, and his obsessions. But despite these complaints, they love Gintoki for everything he is. At the end of most arcs, the 3 of them are leaving all smiling together like a family. When Gintoki disappears in the second movie, Shinpachi and Kagura bawl their eyes out over the loss of who was essentially their father figure. During serious arcs, they legitimately support each other and risk their lives for each other with no second thought or ounce of hesitation. Similarly, Shinpachi complains about Kagura but sees the good side of her and supports her like a brother, and vice versa. Gintoki also constantly complains about Kagura and Shinpachi, but ends up going to extreme lengths to protect them and help them. Like an actual family, they argue and complain about each other a lot, but they're happy to be in the company of each other and support each other unconditionally. There's also Otose supporting and helping Catherine despite her attempts to steal from her bar and her attempt to leave the business to live with someone else. Otose, much like a mother, still tries to console and help Catherine when it all goes downhill, despite Catherine's transgressions. Otose sees the good in her and tries to help her out. And of course there are the members of the Shinsengumi, who all have their own specific issues. Kondo with his terrible love life and annoying stalking of Ote, Hichikata with his mayo and smoking addictions and impulsive nature, and Sogo with his sadism and lack of a moral compass, Yamazaki with his wimpy tendencies and badminton obsession, Tetsunosuke with his delinquent past and lack of experience. Yet all of them have a bond as comrades that is nearly unbreakable, and they all stick their necks out for each other on a constant basis. Gintama, in a very exaggerated way, can teach us to look past people's outward flaws, to see the good in them and accept them for who they are. That solid support as a friend or family member can overcome any personal differences. Another theme is overcoming the loss of loved ones. So one thing that many characters in Gintama have in common is that they've lost someone very important to them. Many characters' current personalities are shaped by the loss of a family member, mentor, significant other, or friend. Gintoki, Takasugi, and Katsura with Shoyo, Kagura with her mom, the Shimura siblings with their father and later Obi Hajime, Otose with Tatsuguro, Sogo with Mitsuba, and the list goes on and on. Most of these characters managed in one way or another to come to terms with that loss and move on in their lives, and each character does so in very unique ways, even taking that experience to become better people. Gintoki withdrew from his life of combat but dedicated himself to passing on Shoyo's teachings. Katsura continued the rebellion against the Tendosho but with the doctrine Shoyo left behind. Kagura took example from the benevolence and good-heartedness of her mother to not embrace the rough Yato lifestyle. The Shimura siblings are spurred on to keep their father's dojo running at all costs after his passing. Saigo feels compelled to take on the role of both mother and father to his son after losing his wife, and therefore gains a more tolerant viewpoint on gender identity. These characters all got over the death of their loved ones in their own unique way, and in some cases those losses shaped them into better people as a result. In Gintama, some of the most troubled people are those who never got over those losses, like Takasugi, who was consumed by hatred and anger after losing Shoyo, and nearly destroyed the nation as a result, and Kamui, who harbored intense anger at his father Umibozo for his part in her death, and a neglect and resentment of Kagura for her resemblance to Koka in both looks and personality, and her unwillingness to see the loss in the same vein as him. He let Koka's death consume him and ended up being destructive and impossible to compromise with. Jiraiya's loss of his family members caused him to gain a warped idea on preserving the lives of those he had left, and he ended up nearly ruining Tsukuyo's life as a result. Asaemon attempts to run away from the Ikeda clan after Yaemon forced her to execute her father who had committed treason against the state, before being convinced to go back and set things right. A defining factor of these characters is that they were unable to get over their losses and didn't take any sort of lessons from those losses, but they ended up being consumed by grief and anger, and ended up blaming the world for the loss of their loved ones. The overall message in the contrast between these characters and the main protagonist is that letting the loss of loved ones define who you are ultimately leads to more grief and sorrow, and only by using what you learned from that person when they were alive can you truly overcome your loss of them. The final theme in Gintama that I noticed was tolerance and unity. With Gintama's events being based on the real Japan's interactions with the West in the late 19th and early 20th century, it wouldn't be a surprise if the stand-ins for the Western powers were not given the most forgiving of portrayals. That time was not a particularly pleasant one for East Asian history, but Hideaki Sorachi does not give us a black and white world in which the Japanese are good and the Amanto are evil. We are shown how rotten both sides can be, with both committing acts of evil and killing indiscriminately. And we are also shown how good people on both sides can be, and how Japanese and Amanto can manage to get along and even be best friends. Kagura and Catherine find a second family in the human company of Shinpachi, Gintoki, and Otose. Elizabeth becomes Katsura's most trusted soldier in the Joishishi and his best friend. Hetero and his family, despite their terrifying appearances, are some of the most peaceful people in the Kabuki district. And through Umibozo's own story, we are shown a perspective on love, family, and tragedy from the Amanto side of the coin. There are also lesser, much smaller examples, most of which are from short comedic arcs, but by creating Amanto characters that can make us laugh just as much as the human characters, Sorachi serves to give those Amanto characters more dimensions than just being aliens who don't like or don't understand humans. They have their own situations with their own interests and even fears. That not only makes the world of Gintama much more interesting as a viewer, but raises the profile of the characters he creates, even if those characters are short-lived, and even sends a message that everyone, whether Japanese or not, is different and there is no clear-cut or inherent malevolence or benevolence in anyone or in any given side. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll most likely be unable to post as often as I have this summer, since I'll have to go back to college soon and I've also taken up a job recently. But I'll try to upload videos at least once a week. Anyway, thank you for the continued support. If you like my content enough and want to ask me questions about it, or if you just want to follow a nerd who also happens to talk about soccer, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I haven't come up with something to celebrate if I reach 200 subscribers, so I'll keep you guys posted on that when I come up with something. Anyway, thank you for watching and take care.